Medical cannabis is booming in Australia. More than 1 million prescriptions have been filled since it was legalised in 2016. But now there are calls to decriminalise the drug for recreational use to take advantage of a market tipped to be worth trillions around the world. Here's Landline's Sean Murphy.
This is medicinal cannabis. It's a highly controlled crop in Australia and it's usually grown hydroponically or in water. But at Simra Life Sciences, they're growing it organically in the rich red volcanic soils of the Alstonville Plateau in northern New South Wales.
There's a more diverse range of nutrients and that results in a better product, as well as an integrated pest management factor as well. The fact that there's a lot of predators in the soil and we don't get the problems with root diseases and the like.
Agronomist Leo McLean has grown 30 different strains of cannabis here and has 8 in production now.
Yeah, there are some that are relatively untried and tested, so we're making sure that we get the best production as well as high levels of secondary metabolites and THC and the like, and we're trialling all of those just to make sure that we produce a product that's suited to the market.
Partners Joel Hardy and Simon Pettinger were granted a licence to grow medical cannabis 6 years ago.
This is obviously a huge multi-million-dollar investment. Are you making any money yet?
No, we're not profitable, unfortunately, yet. It's been a long journey to get to where we've got to from a regulation standpoint, from a construction standpoint, even DAs and things like that have cost us time. And it is a lot of money and expensive to enter this market as an Australian producer.
As a start-up biotech company, there's been a big focus on research and development. They're trying to maximise production of the cannabinoids in the plants, including THC, which is the psychoactive component that produces a high, but it's also highly prized for its medicinal benefits. Most recently, they've invested millions of dollars in clinical trials on end users. They've developed an oil-based medicine that's been used in the world's first medicinal cannabis trial for chronic back and neck pain.
And what we found was that 75% of their patients actually found an improvement in their pain.
Medical advisor to the study was Professor Richard Chai, a palliative care and pain management specialist at Sydney's St Vincent's Hospital. The number of patients was small, he says, with only 28 participants, but the results were clinically significant.
Not only their pain, but all the other symptoms associated with pain. So they were less depressed because they were in less pain. They were less anxious about their pain. They were able to sleep much better. And because of all of that, they were able to do more for themselves. Rather than being bedbound with pain, they were actually able to go out and do more walking, do more work for the economy, and become much more useful people in our society rather than someone in pain all the time.
Felicity Dalton's a retired social worker. Music has been a lifetime passion, but an autoimmune condition meant chronic pain made her feel like her life was out of tune.
When you're in chronic pain, you don't know when it's going to end and you feel that you don't know where your future lies.
She's one of 3 million Australians suffering from chronic pain, but she says taking medicinal cannabis daily has changed her life.
It's made me a very calm person. It's taken away the stress of pain, and that means I can get on with my life and do what I really want to do.
Chronic pain costs the Australian economy about $70 billion a year. Simra is hoping its combination of THC and CBD can be approved for Australia's Register of Therapeutic Goods and ultimately the government subsidised pharmaceutical benefits scheme. But it needs to spend many more millions of dollars on further clinical trials involving many more patients.
At the moment, it's quite a low return because we've got to do a phase 3 study before we get anywhere near to registration. But we think that's the future of cannabis as a medical product, particularly in the oil space, where we think there's a really unmet need for chronic pain patients who can't find medications other than opiates that are really helping them ease their pain.
One of the challenges for the medical cannabis industry in Australia is coming up with the clinical evidence to support the therapeutic benefits of different cultivars for different medical conditions. Plants are not like pharmaceuticals. THC and CBD are known compounds and can't be patented.
At Sydney University's Brain and Mind Centre, a $33.7 million donation is funding the Lambert Initiative, a world-leading research and advocacy centre for medical cannabis. It's doing the heavy lifting on Australia's cannabis research.
So, since you established in 2015, how many studies have you actually undertaken?
I think we've done about 60, actually. We've got 12 clinical trials currently underway.
Ian McGregor is a professor of psychopharmacology and the academic director of the initiative.
There's so much work to be done, both in terms of clinical trials that will prove that cannabis-based medicines are useful for particular conditions, and that helps prescribers use cannabis-based medicines with confidence.
While the evidence is still being gathered, he says, Australians are embracing medicinal cannabis in huge and growing numbers.
We've seen an explosion of patient numbers, an explosion in prescriptions, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years. So we now have more than 300,000 patients. There's been more than 1 million approvals for medicinal cannabis. The big three are chronic pain, anxiety, and sleep.
He says the fastest growing trend is among 18 to 30-year-olds, mostly using cannabis flower, moving from the black market to a legal so-called green cannabis market. He believes Australia is following what happened in Canada, where legal medicinal cannabis became so widespread the government made it legal for recreational use.
Well, I think we could probably do worse than emulate Canada. If you look at what's happened with legalisation in Canada since 2018, there's no major red flags in terms of things like youth mental health or increased use in young people or motor vehicle accidents. It's hard to identify anything that, where the sky caved in because cannabis became legal.
At Simra, they clone their cannabis plants to ensure consistent growth and production of cannabinoids. But they argue there's no consistency in the Australian market. Canadian imports dominate with about 80% of the market and have only recently been forced to meet Australian quality standards. And there's still a year's worth of imported stock to be consumed here before there's close to a level playing field for Australian growers.
In Australia, we do everything to a very high pharmaceutical and agricultural standard, and we're very well regulated by the Office of Drug Control. In other countries, that's not the case, where they've got a recreational environment or no medical cannabis programs at all. In some cases, we're not even allowed to export into those countries, which is not really fair trade. It's actually a non-tariff trade barrier.
While I'm here today, my every move is being monitored. It's part of the strict conditions imposed by the Office of Drug Control. The farm is under 24-hour surveillance. Every plant is numbered for seed to sale tracking, and all 35 employees have undergone police background checks.
Well, what we've got in Australia is an industry that is burdened by overregulation. We can grow this product safely and securely, but if you look at what the Australian industry has to do in terms of security, compliance, ongoing regulation, it's an incredible cost that other jurisdictions aren't having to deal with.
The Honourable Jeremy Buckingham.
Jeremy Buckingham represents the Legalised Cannabis Party in the New South Wales Parliament.
And I know that people keep talking about cannabis being wacky, and that's a trope. It's a tired, stereotypical trope. Cannabis is going to be an industry in this country globally as big as alcohol in the next 10 years. In America, it's already becoming bigger than alcohol. In the United States, cannabis is worth $100 billion to their GDP. It is going to be a $1 trillion industry in a generation.
He points to the Northern Rivers Hemp Growers Cooperative as a model for a legalised cannabis industry. The co-op is made up of 6 small family farms working together growing and marketing hemp for the wellness market. But they've also invested heavily in research and development for a range of other products.
We're working on building products. We're looking into things like paper, rope, plastic packaging. The plant has a million uses. It's a zero waste product. We can use it for fertiliser, we can use it for mulch, pet food, pet blankets, toys, nappies, clothing. I mean, the plant can clothe you, it can feed you, it can house you. And we're just trying to do whatever we can to help plug some gaps in the Australian industry.
It's industrial hemp bred without THC. But even without any psychoactive properties, they still face strict conditions. The co-op has its own retail outlet in Nimbin. Its products can only be sold as massage oils and cosmetics here in Australia, but overseas they can be taken as a whole-of-plant extract, a health tonic.
We are sending our products overseas, and if that's what we have to do, we will. But it's changing, and now people are realising, and it is changing. And pretty soon we'll be allowed to make our products, the products that we send overseas, we'll be able to make them here, and it won't be a problem.
Jeremy Buckingham says it's time for dedicated industry policies aimed at jobs in regional areas.
We can create tens of thousands of jobs in the regions where they are desperately needed. As we transition out of native forest logging, as we transition out of coal mining and some of the other extractive industries, we can replace those jobs with a medicinal cannabis industry. But the way to do that is to make sure we have lots of small players making money, creating jobs, returning money to their local economies.
In Canada, legal cannabis has severely cut back the medicinal market. But here in Australia, growers such as Simra believe in a fully legalised environment, there'll be room for both.
I think that there's still an opportunity and still a place for a medically registered PBS product, because then patients wouldn't have to pay for their medications and they would be covered by Medicare. And secondly, there's always going to be a place for people wanting to work with their doctor on a real chronic pain or other condition that they need a program of care, and working with their doctor on dose, formulation and product.